A strong sea breeze swept across Modavi Bay, Tahiti. On a March morning in 1791, the sun had not yet risen high, but the waves were already pounding against the hull of HMS Pandora, the Royal Navy's fearsome manhunter. With 24 cannons and 134 seasoned sailors, the Pandora was a perfect war machine, dispatched to hunt down the mutineers of the Bounty. Just hours after anchoring, 3 figures trudged from the shore toward the ship. Their bodies were covered in tattoos like the natives, their skin sun-darkened, and their hair long and tangled. As they climbed aboard, they trembled and gave their names: Peter Heywood, George Stewart, and Joseph Coleman, sailors who had once served on the Bounty. "We are innocent," cried Heywood, the 18-year-old, his voice hoarse with thirst. "We were either abandoned or forced into the mutiny." Thomas Heywood, a former Bounty crewman who had drifted with Captain Bligh after the mutiny, stared coldly at them. Instead of offering a handshake, he turned to Captain Edward Edwards and said, "These are the men, sir." Without a word of explanation, the 3 were dragged below deck to a cramped wooden cage known as Pandora's Box. It was a makeshift prison built to hold the mutineers, barely enough room to crouch, no light, and suffocating air. Stewart tried to peer out through a crack. "At least give us some water, ... A boot slammed against the cage. "Shut up, traitor." In the darkness, the 3 men had no idea this was only the beginning of their nightmare. While the Pandora scoured the Pacific for rebels, back in London, William Bligh sat in a lavish office of the Royal Navy, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chilly air. He knew the unwritten rule all too well: lose a ship, lose your head. The memory of that fateful night, April 28, 1789, still haunted him. Fletcher Christian, once his close friend, had led a group of mutineers, tied up Bligh, and cast him and 18 loyal men adrift in a small boat in the vast Pacific. But Bligh was no ordinary man. Upon reaching the Dutch East Indies, he quickly set about crafting a plan to save his reputation. Urgent letters were sent to the Admiralty, portraying Christian and his men as bloodthirsty pirates, while Bligh cast himself as the helpless victim. "I had no choice but to sign," stammered sailor John Fryer, as Bligh shoved a paper in front of him. It was a testimony declaring Bligh entirely blameless. Returning to England even before some of his crew, Bligh skillfully steered public opinion. He turned the tale of his 4,000-mile voyage in a small boat into a legend of survival. Newspapers hailed heroic Captain Bligh. In October 1790, the court-martial ended with the verdict, "Not guilty." But Bligh went further. In his soon-to-be-published book, he painted the mutineers as men who had lost their humanity, sleeping with Tahitian women, tattooing themselves like savages. Christian was called the Black Man, a racially charged slur, despite the fact that Bligh himself had once been enamored with Tahitian dancers. Back in the Pacific, the mutineers wrestled with their decision. After abandoning Bligh, Christian had steered the Bounty back to Tahiti, but he knew this could only be a temporary haven. Tubui, Christian pointed on the map, a small island unmarked on official charts, but upon landing, tragedy struck. A native was caught stealing. Instead of easing tensions, Christian ordered a brutal flogging. That night, dozens of dugout canoes surrounded the Bounty. "Fire!" Christian roared. Cannon blasts shattered the air. Grapeshot tore through the fragile boats. The water turned red with blood. The mutineers fled back to Tahiti, deceiving King Pomea with tales of Captain Cook's imminent return. Pigs, goats, and chickens were loaded aboard. 9 Tahitian women were lured onto the ship, including Isabella, Christian's lover. Some wept and refused, but were threatened into submission. "Pitcairn Island will be our home," Christian reassured his crew as the island came into view. They burned the Bounty to erase all traces. Flames consumed the once proud vessel of the Royal Navy. The early years on Pitcairn seemed peaceful. Wooden homes were built, yams planted, livestock multiplied. But seeds of division soon took root. The Tahitian men were treated like slaves. Women became objects of contention. Christian, now fully tattooed in native style, grew increasingly despotic. One morning in 1793, Isabella screamed her husband lay dead in the garden, his back soaked in blood. Christian had been shot from behind by the very Tahitians he had enslaved. The massacre spread. The mutineers turned on each other: jealousy, violence, power struggles. By 1800, only John Adams, a barely literate sailor, remained alive, along with a few Tahitian women and their mixed-race children. In 1808, the American sealing ship Topaz arrived at Pitt. The crew was astonished to find a small community living in peace under Adams's leadership. "I've found God," said Adams, gently stroking a tattered Bible. Thursday, October. Christian, Fletcher's son, had become the village leader. The island that once bore witness to terrible crimes was now a peaceful Havana. Bitter irony, built from the ashes of violence and Bligh. He died in obscurity in 1817, despised by many of his peers, nicknamed the Bounty Bastard. The story of the Bounty is not simply about a tyrannical captain and rebellious sailors. It's a mirror reflecting human nature, how power corrupts when far from civilization, how desire consumes, and how redemption may yet rise from ruin. Like Pandora's box in myth, the Bounty unleashed horrors, but, in the end, one thing remained: hope.